Right. So, what we have discussed in the previous session about IPO services, like initial public offer, and what process initial public offer we follow, that part we have discussed.
Yes.
Now, when we are discussing today about the investment perspective, because this is something connects to the investment banking services. As I told you earlier, we work as a middleman between customer to um, the end result, what customer is expecting, either in form of IPO or else it can be in form of mm, mergers and acquisitions, because organizations, mergers and acquisitions, being investment banking organization, normally uh, we act as a middleman. Now, from the context of business analyst, we should know four different things, because being a business analyst, we provide necessary suggestion to the investment people, right? So because investments are multiple types, investments can be a portfolio investment, portfolio management. Portfolio management means stocks, debentures, right? So at the same time, even mutual funds, investing on mutual funds. This is all something comes under portfolio management. These portfolio management services is one of the core and key business activity which financial institutions performs. If you remember in the beginning sessions of investment banking, I have explained that. Right? So because even portfolio management, financial services will be handled. So in these grounds, generally there are some advices which we need to provide to the customers. Customers is not an individual, as I'm saying. This can be for organization also. Client can be an organization, need not be an customer over here. So whenever we, being a business analyst, we are working on the client environment. Means when we are trying to understand the client environment and all, we need to provide necessary guidelines and necessary suggestions to them, which must be leading to the performance of the investment. Is it clear? Mohsin, right? So on these grounds, normally this will be divided into four different parts. The first one is nothing but investment possibilities, which is the first one. Second one will be called as investment choices. Third one is called investment delivery. And the fourth one is called investment performance. Again, I'm repeating, investment possibilities is the first one. Investment choices is the second one. Investment delivery is the third one, followed by the performance. Now, possible mute yourself, Avish, Mohsin. Please, possible, please mute yourself. If you have any questions, you can unmute.
Okay, sure.
Please mute yourself, Avish.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So if you have any question, you can unmute. Thank you. Right, so these are the four different things. One is investment possibilities, investment choices, investment delivery, followed by investment performances. Now, when we are trying to understand the investment possibilities from the customer perspective, wherein we need to understand the required outcome of the transition what an investment professional or an individual is making to maintain the kind of services. It means whenever we are talking about the investment possibilities, being an individual, whoever individual means as an organization level or an individual level, either it can be of anything. So being a business analyst, we are trying to understand what are the different possibilities in reference to the investments which they want to make for their future benefits, right? This is one area, because these are all more or less, these are all comes under the financial services sector, because last time also I discussed with you banking, financial services, two different things. Banking, again, retail banking and investment banking, financial services are all even connected nowadays. Even because banking services are also offering the stocks, debentures, demat accounts, all that. So there are possibilities where we may be required to provide some solutions to the customers even. The reason why we are discussing this part. Now, when we are trying to understand the investment possibilities, the first one we need to understand the priorities. Normally, these priorities can be classified into three different parts. You know it, because as the requirements what we understood so far, as well as the requirements what we have identified earlier on the same grounds, priorities will also be considered and organized in three different ways. High level priority, intermediary, followed by low level priority. This is what generally the priorities which normally we have to differentiate. High level priorities means whatever the high level priority items in professional and customer wants to achieve. And second level, what are the intermediary priorities followed by the low level priorities. This is all something comes under the priorities part, point number one. So based on the priorities, strategy, because how to invest is all something important, strategy. This is where allocation of portfolio come into picture. For example, an individual wants to invest for their future benefits for the family. An individual wants to invest somewhere around 20,000 rupees per month. Okay, roughly speaking, I'm just giving the rough figure. 30,000 is what an individual wants to invest on. Now, these 20,000, what strategy they were maintaining to invest this money in regular intervals is what is important, because here multiplication of asset or the value of the investment is required, not the addition, because addition never gives you any uplift. If our investment should have an uplift, it has to be multiplied. That is only then only we that respective investment will have an uplift. So for that, there is a strategy which is required. That's the reason why if you see any investment advisory services, you see, there will be a diversification of investment in reference to the portfolios will be taken place. Because some investments we will be investing on stocks. Some amount of money, some X amount of money will be invested on the fixed deposits and all that. So where if there is any requirement where we should have a possibility to break up very fast, right? That's what we have to see. This is where generally we see the possibility in terms of the FDs and all, so that we can break it fast. At the same time, some investments will be made, especially in a form of SIP, right? On monthly basis and all will be invested on the mutual fund part. So strategy of investment, especially from the customer point of view, and how are we suggesting for them is one of the key element we have to follow, because it's not only the high priorities. Of course, priorities of items has to be taken into an account. Apart from the priorities, what we have identified so far, those priorities require some strategy when it comes to the investment perspective, because investment is not something to be added, as I told you, right? Investments must be given an output for us in multiplication, then only it has a value. So that is required. Strategy is needed. Subsequently, we need to have a policy over investment, wherein policy nothing but it's not a decree, I can say, right? I don't say that. Policy nothing but there is a discipline, I can say, right? Policy nothing but a discipline of investment which a customer wants to make. This is where generally policy come into existence. At the same time, asset capability planning. This is where generally this asset capability planning is something connecting with both with priorities as well as the kind of policy what we are making. Because how are we building assets is important. Asset is not a physical asset anymore. That is one area, right? Asset is not, asset is that. Asset means uh, asset can be of stock even, right? Investing on stocks will also be comes under asset part. So asset and capability planning is also one of the key element which normally we have to be considered. At the same time, there must be a long-term planning. This is where generally when there is an investment point coming to existence, we always see from the long-term perspective. That's where, especially when you have studied any financial uh, planning or investment related thing, you always see the benefits, especially in the stock market, especially on the money market and stock market, happens only in long run, not in the short run. Because in short run, whatever the benefits we get will be of very limited. If you want to get any limited benefit, if you want to get any interim uh, direct benefits and all everything, end of the day, we have to do some technical analysis and keep on thrives towards market. Then only that short term returns and all everything is possible. But that's a different thing. But end of the day, when there is a financial investment we are making, it's always required a long-term planning, which is something required. So this is what generally we see when it comes to the investment possibilities is concerned. This is the first thing which we need to have a thought process. This is what generally we call as think. Is it clear to you, Mohsin and Abid? Clear? Listening? Are you listening?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, first point.
Got confused in the last one, that asset and capability planning.
Sorry, yeah. Can you asset and
Asset and
capability planning you're asking?
yeah, I'm getting a bit confused.
Yeah.
Again,
As
Mhm.
right. What is meant by asset and capability planning? Is that your question?
No, actually I got confused in that because strategy is there and policy, like you check how like monthly plan or like that. But in asset and capability planning, so it will all be done by the investment bankers, right?
Assets and capability planning will be done by the investment banker, but make sure we need to have a proper strategy and priorities also in matters.
Okay.
Because assets and capability planning has to be made. That has to be planned by the investment banking companies.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But if
Okay.
you want to make it, on what basis this asset and investment capacity planning will be planned? This will be planned based on the priorities first. Am I right or not? Am I right?
Yes.
Priorities are the important elements, right? Priorities are, these priorities can be For example, investors have priorities, maybe something high level and intermediate low level. For example, education wise, right? So they may be required in yearly some X amount of money for the children education, right? This is one priority. I'm giving you the low level understanding. Okay. So maybe for long term perspective, priorities may be an marriage for the children, all that, right? So the priorities will has to be taken into an account whenever we are working on the assets and capability planning. This is something important when in investment banking, people being an investment banking professionals, whenever we are providing advisory services to the customers. So priorities are the one of the key element we have to take, but make sure these priorities are very much important for us to plan assets and capability planning over here. At the same time, not only understanding the priorities, but building the right strategy of investment, which must provide multiplication over the fund value is essentially required. So for that, there is a discipline which is needed, which normally we call it as policy. So
Okay.
all these things you need to plan for the long-term commitment, not relating to the short-term commitment. So that's the reason why long-term planning is essentially required. All these are the points which are comes under the thinking part, which will be a part of investment possibilities.
Okay.
Do you understand now? Clear?
Yeah.
Mohsin?
Yeah. Got it.
Point number one. Point number two. So when you talk about investment choices, this is where generally this planning comes into picture. Now, this is where generally analysis is required. So analysis, I can say it's a business analysis. Being a business analyst, analysis is also needed, wherein we have to decide which investments to undertake by considering the optimal overall value from the limited resources. Followed by this, we need to understand the current risk appetite. I will go a slight away from this topic and I'll explain you about current risk appetite, for example, right? So let me give you the example for this, because this is something more or less important for you to understand. What is current risk appetite? For example, have you ever met any financial planning advisor? Or else when you go through articles or any information, there will be a common point. If you see in reference to the investments, the common point as follows: start investing about savings in the early ages of an individual. That's what they say. Why? Because if you are in the early ages or early 20s or mid 20s, all that, if you start investing for your future needs, your risk appetite will be higher. Why? Because we don't have any responsibilities, right? So we will be almost single, and we are not required uh, to take care of anyone. In some cases it can be, but mostly not required. So that risk appetite will be more. But once it crosses that age, right? So once it comes with 35 plus 40 near or more, almost obviously, whatever the investments are we making on, whatever the choices we are making, the current risk appetite will be lesser. Will you agree on this point or not?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes, agreed.
Right? So why? Because the current risk appetite will come down when the age has crossed to a certain after a certain limit, because they have regular responsibilities to be taken care of, which is something difficult for any individual to manage resources to be invested for a long-term basis. Because monthly, in 1 month, it may be possible. Maybe second month, it may not be. Am I right or not? Right?
Yes.
Yes or no? Right? So that,
Yes.
that can be of that there will be a choice. So this is where generally this investment choices come into picture. So here being a business analyst or an investment advisory services, whenever you are providing, it is always important for us to analyze and decide what kind of investments are having a possibility by understanding the current risk appetite. But end of the day, this must provide an optimal overall value, because investment should have a value for sure. If the investment doesn't have any value as such, so then there will be of no use of investments to be made here. So for that, what is required? We need to understand the business case. This is where generally, if you remember, when I have given you the case study in the beginning days of our training, if you remember, as far as enterprise analysis is concerned, I'm not sure. I have explained you about the business case. Have you remembered that? Did you remember that?
Yes, we discussed. Business
We
case.
discussed. Did you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah.
Right or not? Right? So we
Yeah.
discussed that. So what was that? What was this? This is as follows. Whenever we see about this, whenever we talk about enterprise analysis, there are some key points we have discussed. What are those whenever we are talking about business case? The first one, we have discussed the first point as called current business situation. Am I right? Second,
Yes.
business problems. Next, alternatives to address the problem. Impacted areas. 5, beneficiaries. Next, assumptions and dependencies to provide solution. Do you remember this? Mohsin, Navish? Do you remember this or not? Are you there?
Yeah.
Did you remember this?
Yeah, we discussed. I need a little brush up. Yeah.
Remember or not? Right. So we
Actually,
have discussed about current business situation. We have discussed about what are the business problems in this. What are the alternatives to address the problem? What are the impacted areas, beneficiaries, followed by assumptions and dependencies to provide solutions. Am I right? Yes or no?
yeah.
So this is where generally, in the same manner, whenever you are trying to understand the investment perspective based on the choices what customer has made, we have to prepare a business case information. What was the business case information here? The first point about business situation. What does mean by business situation here? Situation of the present customer. That's what we call it as business situation. Am I right? Second point. Problems. Problems means here we are thinking about challenges. What are the challenges for the investments? Third point, assumptions and dependencies to provide solutions. Means if you want to make your people to invest in this, what kind of assumptions and as well as dependencies we have to consider. So for that reason, to assess and as well as to identify the dependencies, the reason why assessing the current risk appetite is essentially required. Now, do you understand what is that I am trying to say?
Yes.
Understood or not? Right?
Yeah, got it. Mhm.
Next, followed by this beneficiaries. Beneficiaries nothing but customers. Right? Customers are the one of the beneficiaries which we have to be considered over here. So once we have identified the business case, the next is that agency planning and decision making process. Means decision process is one of the key element we have to be focused more of. What is decision process? Decision process majorly focusing on the kind of decisions what is that we want to make at the right time, because right time, right decision making of right investment is essentially required. The reason why, especially in financial and money market, it's an art of doing two things. One is right time of entry, right time of exit. At what time we have to enter into the market, at what time we want to exit from the market, right? So this is where, which is essentially understandable and which is essentially important when we are working on the investment perspectives. So for that, what is needed? You need to have a decision making process. Make sure there must be a planning for that. So for this planning, you require some strategy to be connected with. At the same time, whatever this discipline we have, based on that policy decisions to be taken. At the same time, how much budget they were expecting to allocate for their investments and all everything will also be considered over here. This is what we talk about budget allocation. Is it clear, Mohsin and Avich?
Yeah. So all these are interconnected, we can
All
say.
these are interconnected. If you observe closely, because the strategy, whatever the strategy are we talking about, this strategy requires a decision making process which is to be taken with. And whatever the policy discipline we are following, that will be connecting with the policy decision making. At the same time, budget allocations and all everything based upon the asset capability, what is that we want to follow. Followed by this, make sure this must be having a long-term planning for sure. Now, if you want to do the agency planning and decision making process end of the day, wherein we have to assess the current risk appetite of an individual who are planning to invest. But end of the day, this risk appetite, whatever they are planning, must have a connectivity to the budget allocation. Means how much budget are we allocating, but make sure that has to be honored in long run. Then only it has a value. Otherwise, it doesn't have any value as such. Clear? Mohsin and Avich. Clear?
Yeah.
Both of you.
Yeah, got it.
Understood or right?
Yeah.
This is where generally the first one, which is called thinking, where we talk about investment possibilities. Second one is called planning, which is required for investment choices. These are the two things. Wherein the third one is called investment delivery, followed by the performances that I am going to discuss in tomorrow session. Clear?
Yeah.
Right, Avich? Right, Mohsin?
Yes.
See you then.
Yeah.
Actually, we have some few questions. Hello.
So, yeah, tell me.
Yeah. So, actually, I was pointed out, like yesterday we were discussing. So, he's currently like getting offers, like getting calls, but they are asking for certifications, like at
1
least
minute.
Scrum.
Let me close the recording.
पास ये फरारी पिस्ता है और ये फरारी 8x2 है और ये ब्लू वाली फरारी स्पाइडर है। चलो बताओ बेटे कौन सी गाड़ी चाहिए? गाड़ी तो मुझे कोई नहीं चाहिए।